spent more time on Zoom in the last 10 weeks than ever before. Now, granted, the majority of our team is virtual, and so we're on Zoom a lot, but that's not what's made it so busy. It's all of the other calls I am doing that require me to be on Zoom. And just last week, I was on such a call, and there were somewhere between 8 to 10 of us on this call. And the person who was leading the conversation began by saying, hey, in the midst of all the craziness that's been going on, let's just go around and everybody share something they are grateful for that has happened in the midst of this pandemic that probably wouldn't have happened outside of these current circumstances. And so everybody went around and shared what they were grateful for that the season has brought about. You know, I talked about how not having to travel has actually been something that I've been grateful for. Typically, there's a lot of travel involved in what I get to do. And so being able to go on walks with my wife or having more time with my kids, like that is something that I got to share. And everybody got to share something. And it was a great way to begin a conversation, to be grounded in gratitude. Because when we're in the midst of a pandemic, when we're in the midst of a wilderness season in our lives, it's so easy to focus on what's not going well that we often forget what is going well, what we are able to be grateful for. And so I love this idea of being grounded in gratitude. I think it's one of the ways in which we experience grapes in the desert. And if you're just tuning in, this is part 3 of our mini-series, Grapes in the Desert. And it's centered around this passage in Hosea 9:10, where God says, when I found Israel, it was like finding grapes in the desert. And the desert is this metaphor for these times in our lives when things aren't going well. It's a bleak existence. It's frustration, it's pain, it's sorrow, it's tragedy, it's disappointments. It's going through a pandemic. And so we've been talking about these ways in which we experience grapes, this amazing gift in the midst of a bleak wilderness experience that gives us nourishment. It gives us life. It allows us to thrive in the midst of harsh circumstances. And gratitude is that. Gratitude is a grape. And I've talked about this idea of being grounded in gratitude before. In fact, episode 13 was entitled Grounded in Gratitude. And the episode after that, episode 14, was talking about blessing God 100 times a day. How can we find all these ways that we can be grateful throughout our day? Because gratitude has been a significant thing in my life. And I have found that when I can wake up in the morning and ground myself in gratitude, regardless of the circumstances, things go so much better throughout the day. And so you've heard me share, if you've been following the teaching series for any length of time, that I've got this gratitude journal. I call it Grounded in Gratitude. And the first thing I do in the morning is I have to fill in at least 2 things I'm grateful for from the day before. And I literally just sit there and go, God, what have you been up to? What has happened? Have I missed anything? What do I need to be grateful for? And then when I launch into my morning prayer, I always begin with what's on my gratitude list, grounded in gratitude. Regardless of what you are going through, I believe that gratitude is a daily necessity that we need to ground ourselves in. But when it comes to a wilderness season of our lives, gratitude isn't enough. There's actually something else we need as well. And that, my friends, is what we call lament. Now, if you're not familiar with this word, or this word may be a little bit fuzzy for you, the idea of lament is expressing sorrow, sadness, disappointments, frustrations, pain. Essentially, whatever is not going on well in our lives, we name it, we say it, we express it in some way, shape, or form. And lamenting is something that most of us don't do all that well, especially those of us who live in the West. And the reason for that is that it's almost like sadness is treasonous in our Western world. Like if you're not doing well and you express any form of sadness, it's like someone is there to go, but wait a minute. You've all of these things to be grateful for. Cheer up. It's going to be okay. Things are going to get better. And you're sitting over here going, yeah, but I just feel a sense of frustration and disappointment. And people don't do well with our sadness, our pain. They often want to resolve it with some kind of positive comments about how things are going to get well. But for us, the ability to sit in this sadness, to name it, to identify it, to lament whatever losses we are experiencing is absolutely essential to being someone who is healthy, especially when we're going through a wilderness experience. I was just thinking about this today in preparation for this teaching. And it reminded me of an illustration that we've all heard probably hundreds of times, which is I'm holding a glass of water here. And is this glass half full? Or is it half empty? You know, for someone who says, well, it's half full, then you go, well, that's someone who is grounded in gratitude. They see the positive things. If someone says, well, it's half empty, they're more of the pessimistic individual who's kind of focusing on what's not there. And it's like we always say, it's either half full or it's half empty. How about no? How about it's both? That it's totally fine to look at this and go, you know what? It's half full. Like this is a form of gratitude. Half of the glass is full of water. But it's just as valid to also say in that same moment, it's also half empty. That we can be grateful for what we have. And at the same time, we can also lament the loss. We can lament what's not there as well. In fact, it's very biblical to hold both of these realities at the same time. Case in point, the book of Psalms. 150 Psalms in the book of Psalms. That's actually more technically correct to say that there are actually 5 books within the Psalms. But when you look at all 150 Psalms, there's 2 primary groups with which the Psalms fall into. Psalms of praise, you could say gratitude, and also Psalms of lament. And one of the fascinating things that when you're reading the book of Psalms is how these Psalms navigate between praise or gratitude and lament. And sometimes in the exact same psalm, you have both of these sitting side by side. Psalm 13 is a great example of such a psalm. And when you open up to Psalm 13, it says a psalm of David. And one of the things that we know about David is that David constructed most of his psalms when he was in the desert, when he was in the wilderness, when he was on the run from either his son Absalom or on the run from King Saul. And Psalm 13 is one of these psalms where you just see the tension of how David is trying to navigate his circumstances. And notice what he says here. It says, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes. or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise. Right? We just jumped from this lament to back over here to this praise. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. Gratitude. Lament. And they sit side by side. I mentioned earlier that I don't think we lament well in our culture because culture always says we've got to be happy. But one of the things that this pandemic has done is it's just baselined everybody. It's dropped everybody into a wilderness experience. And I believe that just this idea of being more accepting to one another's sadness is becoming more and more part of our culture as a result of this pandemic. But here's the problem that I am seeing, is that people still feel guilty when it comes to lamenting the losses they have experienced in this season. That they know that they have so much to be grateful for, and they want to sit in this chair and go, yes, but I'm going to be grateful for this, and I need to be grateful for that, and at least I have this, or at least my family's doing well. But in the same token, there's this thing that's going on inside that just goes, yeah, but there's just something that feels so deeply unsettling within me. And friends, that is the lament that is trying to come out. And it is healthy to be both grounded in gratitude as well as to lament the loss. Those things that we have lost, those things that have brought pain and sadness and sorrow. You see, if we don't lament the losses, if we don't lament the frustrations, the sadness, the disappointments that we feel, they get stuffed down inside of us. And when we don't name it, when we don't drag them out into the light, it's like they have this adverse effect on us. And it also has these adverse effects on other people as well, because we just allow it to sit inside of us. And all of a sudden, we don't even recognize how much it has discombobulated us on the inside, that we lash out in frustration. We say something that we regret. We just have this sense of agitation because the thing that's on the inside needs to get out. And lament is the way we get there. And so, friends, as we're thinking about how do we experience grapes in the desert, in the midst of this pandemic, or maybe this will be further down the line, we're out of this pandemic and you're going through a wilderness experience and you're watching or listening to this. Listen, grounded in gratitude is in fact grapes, but so is lamenting the losses. We need to have both in order to be healthy in the midst of our wilderness experiences. So here's what I want to invite you to do. I want you to make two lists. I want you to make a grounded in gratitude list and identify, 8, 10, 12 things that you are grateful for in the midst of this desert experience. And then I also want you to make a list of lamenting the loss, to identify all of the things that have been taken away, all the things that have brought pain and frustration and sorrow and sadness to you in the midst of this desert experience. And I want you to make that list as well. Maybe for those of you who are introverts, this is you just doing this in some quiet time and wrestling through this. For those of you extroverts, maybe it's actually talking it out with someone and just being able to put some language to the way that you feel, because I know that you often process verbally much more than someone like me who's an introvert, who likes to sit in the quiet and try to figure everything out and then bounce it off, his wife or, his best friends in order to get some feedback. But I want you, however you get those lists, I want you to then take them before God and take them before someone else, your spouse, a best friend, a sibling, someone that loves you and that can just sit in whatever tension the lamenting the losses come forth in you and can just be with you in the midst of it. Because I believe that if we can identify those things that we are grateful for, that we can be grounded in gratitude and speak those out on a regular basis, it allows us to be a healthy person. And in the same token, I believe that if we get really good at understanding what's going on the inside, to be able to identify those things that have been lost, to lament the losses, and to be able to give voice to those just as much as we give to the voice of gratitude, that we will find grapes in the desert, that we will find a sense of health as we go through these challenging seasons, because we've learned to be both grounded in gratitude as well as to lament the loss. So friends, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for listening. If you know someone who could just benefit from this, share this with them. There are discussion questions at Walking the Text. Would love to invite you to go further and deeper with the questions that are there. And as always, we also have a place on both YouTube with our channel, as well as on the website for you to leave comments. If there's anything that really sticks out, if there's anything you think could benefit someone else, leave a comment. We'd be greatly blessed by your words. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks for listening. And may you walk out the text well in your life.